Section 19, Buyer-Broker Agreements and Compensation in Today's Market. Do's and don'ts of agency. Introduction. Agency has changed. In the previous section, we discussed the consent to limited representation form and the challenges that arise when a brokerage represents both parties in the same transaction. We learned that agency disclosure, informed consent, and clear communication are critical to protecting buyers, sellers, and brokers. Over the last several years, however, one area of agency practice has undergone significant change. Historically, many agents focused on procuring cause disputes, MLS compensation offers, and determining which broker earned the commission. Today's market is different. Buyer representation agreements have become one of the most important agency documents used in real estate, and compensation discussions now occur directly between brokers, buyers, and sellers. As a result, understanding buyer-broker agreements and compensation conversations has become a critical part of agency law and professional practice. The buyer-broker agreement is about agency first. Many agents mistakenly believe the buyer-broker agreement is primarily a compensation agreement. It is not. The buyer-broker agreement is first and foremost an agency agreement. The agreement establishes the relationship between the buyer and broker. It identifies who the broker represents, explains the services being provided, defines the broker's duties, and establishes the expectations of both parties. Compensation is certainly part of the agreement, but agency comes first. This ties directly back to our earlier discussions regarding the READ form. Buyers should understand who represents them before discussing homes, negotiating contracts, or sharing confidential information. Why buyer representation matters. Imagine a buyer attends an open house and begins discussing their finances, motivation, and future plans with the listing agent. The buyer assumes they are receiving advice from someone working in their best interests. The listing agent assumes the buyer understands that the agent represents the seller. Neither party has clearly discussed agency. This type of misunderstanding has historically created many agency disputes. A properly executed buyer-broker agreement helps eliminate this confusion by clearly identifying the broker's role from the beginning of the relationship. Real-world example: the internet buyer. A buyer finds a property online and clicks the Schedule a Showing button. Within minutes, they are connected with an agent. The buyer assumes, "This is my agent." The agent assumes, "This is simply an inquiry." Without a discussion regarding agency, both parties may have completely different expectations. The buyer-broker agreement creates clarity and establishes the relationship before misunderstandings develop. Compensation conversations are different today. For many years, agents became accustomed to compensation being displayed through MLS systems. Today's market places greater emphasis on discussing compensation directly with buyers and sellers. This means buyers should understand how their broker is compensated before entering into a transaction. It also means agents must be comfortable having compensation discussions early in the relationship, rather than waiting until an offer is submitted. Transparency creates trust. Surprises create complaints. The most successful agents are those who explain compensation clearly and professionally from the beginning. The Seller Compensation Addendum. One of the most important tools available to buyer agents today is the Seller Compensation Addendum. This form allows the buyer and seller to negotiate compensation for the buyer's broker as part of the transaction. The addendum does not replace the buyer-broker agreement. Instead, the two documents work together. The buyer-broker agreement establishes the buyer's agreement with the broker. The Seller Compensation Addendum creates an opportunity for the seller to contribute toward that compensation. This distinction is important because many consumers mistakenly believe the seller automatically pays the buyer's broker. In reality, compensation is fully negotiable. Agency and compensation are not the same thing. One of the biggest misconceptions in today's market is the belief that compensation determines agency. It does not. An agent may represent a buyer regardless of who ultimately pays the compensation. Likewise, compensation can be negotiated in a variety of ways without changing the agency relationship. The agent's fiduciary duties remain the same. The duty of loyalty remains the same. The duty of confidentiality remains the same. The duty to promote and protect the client's interests remains the same. Agency is established through representation. Compensation is established through agreement. Open houses create agency opportunities. Open houses continue to create agency challenges. A buyer walks through the door and immediately begins asking questions. How much do you think I should offer? Can you represent me? Will the seller take less? These conversations create opportunities for agency misunderstandings. the best practice is to discuss representation early and clearly explain who the agent represents before providing advice. This is another reason buyer-broker agreements have become such valuable tools. They help define the relationship before negotiations begin. Unrepresented buyers and sellers. Not every consumer wants representation. Some buyers choose to remain unrepresented. Some sellers choose to sell their property themselves. When this occurs, agents must be especially careful not to accidentally create an agency relationship through their actions. As we discussed in previous sections, providing advice, recommendations, or negotiation assistance to an unrepresented party may create an implied agency relationship. The safest practice is to clearly explain your role, document the relationship, and avoid providing services that could create confusion regarding representation. Documentation protects everyone. Throughout this course, one theme has appeared repeatedly: document the relationship, document the disclosures, document the discussions, document the compensation. When agency conversations occur verbally but are never documented, misunderstandings become much more likely. The buyer-broker agreement provides written evidence of the agency relationship and helps establish clear expectations for everyone involved. Good documentation protects the buyer. Good documentation protects the broker. Good documentation protects the transaction. Common mistakes to avoid. Many agency complaints originate from the same avoidable mistakes: failing to discuss agency early, failing to explain compensation, assuming buyers understand representation, providing advice before establishing the relationship, failing to document discussions, waiting until an offer is submitted before discussing agency. Most of these issues can be avoided through clear communication and proper use of agency forms. The big lesson: today's agency environment is built upon clarity, transparency, and documentation. The buyer-broker agreement has become one of the most important agency tools available to Arizona real estate professionals. It establishes the agency relationship. It clarifies expectations. It explains compensation. It reduces misunderstandings. Most importantly, it helps buyers understand who represents them and what duties are owed throughout the transaction. As agency law continues to evolve, one principle remains unchanged. Successful agents clearly define the relationship before providing services. When agency is properly explained and documented, buyers, sellers, and brokers all benefit from a smoother and more professional transaction experience. Online discussion questions. Question 1. Why is the buyer-broker agreement considered an agency document first and a compensation document second? Answer: because its primary purpose is to establish the representation relationship between the buyer and broker and define the duties owed to the buyer. Question 2. Why should compensation discussions occur early in the relationship? Answer: early discussions create transparency, establish expectations, and reduce misunderstandings later in the transaction. Question 3. Why are open houses potential agency risk areas? Answer: buyers often assume the agent is representing them and may seek advice before agency relationships are clearly established.